Absolutely. We're just saying that we're not going to absolutely have to do the routines, but we do want the mini lessons to be taught. The big thing for this is just remembering that we can split those mini lessons up during other content times. So we know in the beginning of the year, kindergarten is not doing a full hour of reader's workshop, true reader's workshop, where we're pulling guided reading groups, things like that. So we have a lot of extra time there. Writer's workshop, they're not sitting and writing and doing their whole 45-minute block at the beginning of the year. So we have that time too. So you can take those components and move them throughout your day. The biggest thing is just making sure all the components are taught. The letter introduction and assessing order is now going to follow the primary skills. That was a conversation that came up last year, that our current letter sound assessment didn't match the way that the phonics was introducing the letters. So we went ahead and looked at the primary skills. Remember, there's primary, and I think it's called primary and secondary. We looked at the primary skills and we put the letter order that way. So letter introduction can happen that way. And also you'll notice that the letter sounds assessment has also been tweaked to match that. Another big change is the letter sound assessment will be completed for first quarter for teacher and parent data only. So we are no longer going to put that on the grade card. So we'll still assess, you'll still want to do it with your kids, but it's not going to be first quarter on the grade card any longer. It'll actually open up for second quarter. So we'll still do it, we just won't report it on the grade card. And then rhyming, after looking at priority standards and just a lot of different things that came into play, we felt like rhyming was not as big of a hitter as it needed to be. And so therefore we took off the rhyming assessments. There were 2 rhyming assessments, I believe third and fourth quarter. Carrie, if I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm pretty sure it's those 2 quarters. We took those off. So starting next year, we will not have the rhyming assessment any longer. So as you're prepping your classroom and getting things set, those are some documents you want to make sure that you print out. Like I'm thinking the overall, the assessment calendar. You'll want to have a new assessment calendar, things like that. Now, I don't want to misspeak for Carrie, but I'm sure Carrie will have things prepped for her team too, just like I planned on having for my team, just those changes so that we have all the same paperwork in our data binders. I see her shaking her head, so perfect. If not, Carrie will now. Just kidding. Okay, so moving on to first grade. Let's see, and I was trying to see, do we have any first grade people? I can't see everyone. I wasn't sure if we did or not. I'll go ahead and go over it because I can't see. Perfect, we do have people who cover first, so we will go with it. So first grade, we are going to begin launching either the 26th or the 27th. It's that Wednesday or Thursday. So you'll have a couple of days to get your classroom set and then start getting into the launching. The first grade team felt like it was important to still teach the mini lessons and routines, so those will stay the same. Just like in kindergarten, these can be split up during the day just as long as the components are taught. So I know phonics, a big conversation we had was, you know, it might say 15 minutes, but really it's not 15 minutes. It might take 30 minutes. Let's be real. You can split it up during your day, during your schedule, what works for you, just making sure you get those components in. That's the key to all of it. And then there's the connected text part for first grade. These books are not, or this text is not required, but they can still be utilized in different parts of your day. And so we talked about putting them in book boxes for students to look at. You can also send them home. So this does not have to be done whole group any longer. And then moving to second grade. Second grade chose not to do routines either. And their first launching unit will begin August 24th. So right out of the gate, they're going to start right away. Lynn Miller is going to be making a teacher key, and I believe she already has it done. Because if you remember the My Word study of all the the students' books, there's no teacher key anywhere. So Lynn has made teacher keys, and we'll be sharing those out so that you have an idea of, you know, what are the answers to all these things they're looking for. We're also making recordings of passages for the lower students to hear the passage while they can read it, while they can actually read along. We noticed, and we noticed this before we even started, those passages are really intense for our second graders. And so in order to help with that, we're going to be making recordings of kids reading it or teachers reading it, either way, where the student can see the passage, but they're also listening to it being read to them at the same time so that it doesn't hinder that side of it and they're able to do the work. Any questions so far on this part of the presentation? If there's any questions, just pop them into the comment section. We good? Okay, we're gonna keep moving then. All right, so goal number 2, some phonics reminders. So in kindergarten, just some things to be mindful of as we're thinking of starting a new year with phonics, making sure that we're really trusting the system. I know we've had a lot of questions of like, well, why is it taught this way? Or why is it taught that way? Or why is this taught first or this taught last or not as much emphasis here? We feel like being our second year, we really just need to trust the system. It is very systematic and there is a reason that it was created the way it was. And when we looked at making changes, we all kind of felt like we really need to see it a couple years in action to really know what's working and maybe what we need to enhance, not necessarily take away, but we just need to trust the system. So remembering that, a big key to the whole program is that consistent language, which we talked a lot about that in the mini lessons and the routines that are in the launching. So much of it is that consistent language. So students that are in the classroom hear the same language as our interventionists, or if they're going to SPED, they hear the same language. Letter discrimination is huge, really looking at those letters. We talked a lot about how they introduce letters very slow. And it's so that they know those letters upside down, backwards, standing on their head. It doesn't matter. An A is an A is an A. It doesn't matter where that A is, it's always an A. And so, yes, it's slow, but it's working. So we're gonna stick with it. Some ways to supplement teaching letters, because this was another topic. You know, can we introduce all the letters at the very beginning and then take it slow throughout? So there's a lot of different ways that we can enhance that letter teaching. One of the ways we talked about is using the beginning of Writer's Workshop to practice path of movement, because we know path of movement is not built in necessarily. I know in the videos, sometimes they give some ideas, like think of the M that does the hump hump. It's the first one that comes to mind. But just because the first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, that's fun. But you can use that path of movement, or you can use that beginning part of Writer's Workshop to be teaching path of movement. Because again, your blocks of time are not going to be that full 45 minutes for the first couple weeks of school. You can also be teaching phonics through your ABC chart daily. And I know most of you do that. You know, you're reading your ABC chart. And so that's another great place to do it. And then we also discussed doing a letter a day during your morning message and during calendar time. So at the beginning of the year, you could be moving through those letters a little quicker so they can be introduced, but then the phonics will take them slower and really get that letter discrimination down for them. Carrie, is there anything you would add to that? Good.
I think there's some things as when we get into my section of the presentation that we'll just kind of build on that. So, but I think you've covered it there.
Perfect. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, Miss Darylyn's going to take over. Darylyn, do you want to share or you want me to keep sharing?
You can keep sharing. There's just a couple of slides of reminders about first and second grade, and you know, kindergarten had some very specific to kindergarten reminders. First and second grade is more of a general thing and very similar to kindergarten, starting with consistent language. And I would like to add to that consistent routines. That's one thing that Benchmark really emphasizes is you have to have those routines down in order to fit everything in. Have a plan about how you're going to implement it all so that you can start teaching those routines and have those kids moving and keeping it consistent. And consistent language, that's also within your guided reading groups like Amber was talking about. So if you're talking about, you know, in second grade, those patterns that they talk about, using that within your guided reading as well to help pull them into that, oh yeah, I know this. This is a pattern. I've seen this before, and I can make that connection across. With first grade, I know you taught they are very academic in their language, which I think sometimes we are not so academic in our language as far as a long vowel or a short vowel. We're teaching it to them. We can reference that within our guided reading. We're keeping it consistent across between our phonics program and our guided reading. It's all integrated. Trusting the process. The program talks about, if you look at the beginning where it talks about just kind of an overview, it has reasons for success within there. And those are really where I was thinking whenever I was thinking, okay, what do we need to remember so that we can continue to be successful with the program. And one of their big number one is review and repetition, and really just trusting that process. They say once you introduce something, it should be systematically and purposely reviewed for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So just remembering that it's written in a way that you're introducing it and then you're reviewing it, and it's written the way that it is for a reason. And they talk about our goal, which is kind of a shift, I think, even though it's not a shift in our true goal, the way that teachers feel, but in the way that we've taught in the past, is that we are teaching for mastery, not exposure. And that's the way that the program is set up, to have the skills developed across the grade levels. So each grade level is systematically introducing concepts. That goal is mastery for that grade level. And we're not just, throwing that stuff on them and moving on. So we're really looking for that mastery, and that's why it's written the way that it is. So we got to trust that process. Another thing with first grade, which really Amber already hit on as well, is trying to get everything to fit in. And so we talked a lot last year about how can we integrate parts of it into our corners or our stations. And I'm sure this applies to kindergarten and also to second grade. The program says that you want to focus your instructional time on the key lesson parts that increase learning. So the things that are going to have an impact on the learning, that's where your lesson time is. And then the reading and the accountable text and the writing, that stuff is intended for practice. And so there are ways that we can start moving that into our corners and stations. In second grade as well, you have your accountable text as well. And that's where those recordings that we're working on will come in handy to help get your kids a little more independent with those, and also will help with that distant learning if we need to go that way. Just a reminder for second grade, spelling tests, that is optional again for 2021. We've had some kind of back and forth. It's not that we don't see benefits. We just are really looking at staying focused on, like I said, those components that have the most instructional components that have the most learning value. So we're going to hold off on that for now. It's optional again, and then we'll come back to that next year. And I'll turn off my mic and turn it over.
All right, so we'll move on with goal 3. We just wanted to talk about maybe some of the whys behind phonics. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but questions as we were kind of looking at the surveys were just coming up. And this first slide here that I was going to go over is we've all echoed the same sentiment, but it's that systematic approach to teaching that I feel like Darylyn kind of touched on, that I feel like as teachers, we all had that same goal that we wanted for students, but we weren't quite sure how to get there. And so I feel like what the phonics curriculum has done is given us that systematic sequence that we can take students through. And so this is just a very simplified version here where, if we look at like those beginning years for kindergarten, we're really gonna focus in and hone in on those ABCs and short vowels and consonants. And as Amber said, we want to be sure that those kids know those letters inside and out with the recognition that they're starting to attach those sounds to those. And instead of taking more of that kind of spray and pray process where we're as a teacher going, well, I got to teach this and I have to teach this. Really what the process is doing is giving us a very systematic approach. So we're going to get really good at certain things in kindergarten, and then we're going to pass them on to first grade, and then they're just going to continue to build on those skills. So even though it might seem like, well, we're missing some of these, pieces, or we've always, taught things a certain way, if we can trust this process, we're going to get really good at things in one grade level and then just continue to build on it. So we're going to see that growth in students. As I had kind of mentioned, this is pretty passionate on my heart, teaching the earlier grade levels, but I feel like this emphasis on ABC recognition is something that we can't do enough of. And I feel like even with our kiddos who are maybe our striving learners in the older grades, this is still an area that if they're struggling, it's an area that they probably are lacking in. And what we're hoping is as we continue to implement the phonics program that we're not going to see as many of those gaps, but in our older grades right now, this might be a piece that's missing with them. So really big emphasis on that ABC recognition. And I'm just going to be honest, when I was in the classroom, I would go over those letters, but I was attaching a sound to those letters almost immediately. So when this phonics program was introduced, it was a little eye-opening for me, and I had to kind of shift my thinking. So that visual perception piece is really, really big. So the letter symbol must be seen as different from other shapes before the sound is really attached. And that's something that I think has been a really big shift for a lot of our teachers as they've been going through. But that's where letter sorts are really important, where we're explicitly teaching kids to look at the differences between those letters. So, you know, which letters have the sticks, which letters have the circles. They have to know the difference between those before we're really ever starting to place that emphasis on those sounds. ABC charts are giving those concrete links or those hooks. You're finding those within print as well. You're not just isolating those, but you're also taking that then and finding those within continuous text, because that's going to be something as our kids are starting to read, we're wanting them to look letter by letter and to really look through those words. So we need them to have that very fast, rapid letter recognition. And then all the while working on that path of movement, just having that other avenue to get that letter learning in for them. So you'll see on this slide here, there's a link here. Amber, you don't have to pull it up, but it's there for you guys to see. Visual perception, something that we spent a lot of time in my building talking about. So I wanted to share some of these out. And when we're talking about that visual perception piece, sometimes I think it's helpful before we even go to a letter that we go back just a little bit. And I kind of just placed some pictures here. It's some of those simple pieces when we're talking about maybe matching shapes or looking across print to see, like the arrow example here, which direction that arrow is pointing, because there are times I feel like when we're asking kids, you know, what letter is this? What sound does it make? And they might be missing a skill of even knowing, can they even visually see the difference between something? So the link that's there is to, it's an OT Toolbox website, and it's a fantastic resource for you. There's a big freebie pack that has to do with just all sorts of visual discrimination pieces. And it's not just, like shapes, it also goes into like letters. So all the while I say that, we don't want to spend too much time on this task, but I feel like if you have a student that's struggling, this is definitely a place where you could go back to and just do a very quick, you know, assessment with them, maybe work on one of these things, and then move back into really looking at those letters and discrimination. And then the other piece is just remembering that phonics instruction is beneficial for all of our kids. So we feel like this is something that comes more naturally to some of our readers, but it's something that we definitely don't want just to assume. So that's where we go back to that systematic approach, because any phonics is going to help with that accuracy, that fluency, that comprehension, because the more that they are not relying on that working memory as they're reading, the better that fluency is going to be, the better that comprehension is going to be. So we want them to be able to read those words fast and fluent. The strong decoding skills, as I said, with the working memory. And then what we tend to find is that our poor readers are typically relying too heavily on one strategy. And if you really were to look at running records and kind of analyze what's going on, I think a lot of times what our kids are doing is they're overusing those context clues. So they're relying on those picture cues. They're relying on what makes sense instead of really thinking and looking at that print first and then connecting and doing that cross-checking to what would make sense in the story. All right, so do you guys have any questions about any of that? Welcome to add those to the chat or unmute if you have a question or something you'd like to share.
I just want to say a couple things that go along with what you guys were saying about trusting the process, because I think that's so important when we're thinking about teaching for mastery. And what this phonics curriculum does, it kind of gives us the train tracks for our phonics, because in the past in Branson, you know, we were doing, and we still are doing such great things with our groups, but we were kind of missing that whole group phonics instruction. And what I might have thought was important in kindergarten, somebody else might not have thought was important. So this is just giving us those train tracks. So that's kind of just another thing that we're talking about with the trusting the process. And going along with what Darylyn said too, that consistent routine and language. And I think we all know this year more than ever, we're going to have that consistent routine, because we're going to be busy washing hands, getting hand sanitizer, all that stuff all the time. And just that transfer, because we don't want this to be a separate silo. So thinking of, okay, our phonics, yes, we want to make sure that we're saying those same things in our small group and also our writing as well. And as interventionists, the interventionists have also tried to look at the phonics to make sure that we're echoing what you guys are teaching in the classroom. So those are just some things that we're trying to make seamless as well. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on that part. These ladies did a great job just kind of walking us through it again. Does anybody else have any question or concern? Does anybody have a kudos for the phonics program?
I have a kudos to Fabiola for her commitment to learning about phonics.
Yes, look at that. I love it. We really need a picture of that, Fabiola, in the dentist chair. That is commitment. All right, coaches, do you have anything else, or are we good?
The only thing I was going to share was I went ahead and put the sign-in sheet in the chat, so it's easier to access than on the slides. If you're on the slides, you can access it there. So make sure you sign in for being here.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Everybody have a good start of the school year if I don't see you before then. And good luck with everything. Have a good day.